My name is Jack Reynolds. I'm 55 years old and spent most of my life serving in the United States Navy, traveling across oceans and countries, always thinking I had control over the chaos around me. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the night I lost my daughter Emma 25 years ago, or so I thought. She was only 6 months old when a fire broke out in the pediatric wing of the hospital where she was staying. I remember getting the call while on duty, the words barely making sense over the line. Flames, smoke, screaming parents. It was a nightmare that imprinted itself in my mind forever. The hospital said there was nothing left of her, that all the infants in that ward had perished. We buried an empty casket, and in that moment, my marriage began to unravel. My ex-wife Linda and I drifted apart, the grief carving a chasm too wide for words, and I was left with a house full of memories and silence. Every October 3rd, I lit a candle for Emma. The flickering light cast shadows on the walls, shadows that reminded me of the daughter I once held and the life I thought was stolen. Sleep became a stranger, meals became automatic, and I went through the motions of living without really being alive. People in my town see me as the quiet former Navy officer, always polite, never speaking too much about myself. They don't know the nightly ritual of staring at her empty nursery, the faint smell of baby powder still lingering in the room, or how I talk to her in the dark when I think no one is listening. That's the life I've carried for 25 years, walking alongside a ghost, yearning for a moment that could never come. Before that night, life felt simple in the small Virginia town where Linda and I had built our home. I was often away with the Navy, but every time I returned, the house was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of her cooking, a welcome reminder of why I served in the first place. Evenings were our sanctuary, with Emma in her crib and Linda humming softly while I recounted the day's strange and distant experiences. Our weekends were full of small rituals that became memories I now cling to. Saturday mornings meant pancakes and syrup-sticky fingers, and I would carry Emma to the porch to watch the sun rise over the trees while Linda brewed coffee and glanced out the kitchen window, smiling at the simple beauty of our life. The house was noisy and warm, full of the little chaos of life with a baby, yet it was perfect in a way only happiness can be, unremarkable to anyone else but sacred to us. I remember how Emma would grab for my hand as I returned from a deployment, her tiny fingers wrapping around mine like she understood I was hers no matter the distance. Linda would watch with a soft smile, brushing strands of hair from her face, and in those moments, the Navy uniform felt heavy, but the home felt light, filled with laughter that echoed even in the quiet corners. Music often played in the background, a mix of old records and our favorite songs, giving rhythm to dinners that were more about togetherness than perfection. Our home was not grand, just a modest brick house with creaky floors and a yard where Emma took her first steps. I remember evenings of story time in the living room, where Linda's voice blended with mine, weaving tales that became part of the fabric of our family. Each ordinary moment felt extraordinary because it was ours, and I never imagined how quickly the fragile threads of happiness could unravel. The day everything changed started like any other, but the moment I received the call, the world shifted beneath my feet. Flames had erupted in the pediatric wing of the hospital where Emma was staying, and the sound of my commanding officer's words over the phone barely registered as coherent sentences. I remember racing through the streets, sirens wailing around me, my mind refusing to accept what was happening. Arriving at the hospital, chaos greeted me, firefighters shouting, parents screaming names into the smoke, the acrid scent of a burning building filling my lungs. I found Linda outside, trembling and held back by staff, her face streaked with tears, her voice breaking as she said our daughter might still be inside. The fire was merciless, consuming everything in its path, and within moments, the pediatric ward was lost, leaving only uncertainty and terror behind. The hospital administrators told us that all infants in that wing had died and that there was nothing left to recover. They pushed for cremation, insisting it was the merciful thing to do, and we agreed in shock and disbelief. I was too consumed by guilt and paralysis to demand an investigation or DNA confirmation, desperately wanting to believe the nightmare was over. We accepted the empty casket as our final, horrible truth. The memorial service that followed was for an empty coffin, a shell that could never hold the child we had loved and hoped to protect, and in that hollow space, our marriage began to fracture irreparably. In the months that followed, Linda and I drifted apart, our grief too heavy to share. I started sleeping in Emma's nursery, surrounded by her toys and the faint smell of baby powder, while Linda withdrew, leaving the house cold and silent. The life we had built together crumbled, and I became a ghost of myself, performing duties without truly living, haunted by the daughter I thought I had lost forever. It was a rainy November night, the kind where the wind rattles the windows and the streetlights blur into streaks of gold and white. I was alone in my small Virginia home, the house feeling emptier than ever, when a knock echoed through the hallway. Standing on my porch was a young woman, drenched despite holding a thin umbrella, her eyes catching the dim light in a way that made my chest tighten. She had Linda's deep brown eyes, my stubborn chin, and the same delicate features my mother had when she was young. For a moment, I stepped back, unable to process the impossible sight before me. The wind and rain seemed to fade, leaving only her voice as she whispered the single word that shattered 25 years of grief, Dad. I blinked, thinking it was a cruel trick, my mind racing to explain what I was seeing. The resemblance was uncanny, every detail of her face pulling memories from the past like a tide. She didn't say anything else at first, just waited, and the tension in the air made it impossible to breathe, as if the world itself held its silence. Finally, she spoke again, calmly this time, revealing her name as Emma and hinting at a story that would undo everything I had believed. My hands trembled as I opened the door, and I realized that the daughter I thought I had lost was standing right in front of me. That one knock had broken years of sorrow and disbelief, and nothing would ever be the same again. Emma stepped inside, her coat dripping onto the entryway mat, and began to speak in a voice that was steady but trembling with years of hidden fear. She told me she had been taken from the hospital that night, placed in the care of a kind couple who could not have children, and raised as their own. Every year, she explained, Linda had sent money to ensure she was safe, keeping the truth buried while I mourned at an empty grave. She handed me a folder filled with documents, birth certificates, photographs, school records, each one carefully preserved, showing her birth date as April 15th, 1998, exactly matching the day we believed we had lost her. I could barely breathe as I traced her name on the certificates, Emma Grace Reynolds, and flipped through pictures of her smiling as a child, growing into the woman standing before me. Each photo confirmed the resemblance, my stubborn chin, Linda's eyes, and my mother's delicate features, all stitched into a life I never knew existed. Emma also brought DNA evidence, already tested and ready for confirmation. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in my hands, and I could feel the years of grief, the hollow nights, the empty milestones crashing down in a flood of disbelief. I could no longer deny it. My daughter was alive, and everything I had thought to be true was suddenly undone, leaving only the raw shock of a miracle I never expected. I called Linda that night, my hands shaking as I held the phone, trying to steady my voice. When she answered, her tone was flat and measured, as if she had rehearsed every word for 25 years, and I could feel the weight of betrayal pressing into the space between us. I asked about Emma, about the payments, about the lies, and one by one, she confirmed the truth. Her older brother, George, had orchestrated the fake death certificates and manipulated the situation. The full story spilled out. George, a desperate man in deep financial debt, had exploited the chaos of the fire. He had contacts at the hospital and knew about a wealthy, childless couple, Martin and Adele Wayland, who were desperate to adopt. George promised them a miracle baby from the fire, Emma, in exchange for a massive sum of money that would clear his debts. Linda was cornered. He convinced her that because I was a Navy man constantly deployed, Emma would be safer and better provided for with the Waylands. He threatened to expose a fabricated negligence claim against Linda if she didn't comply. She chose complicity over my grief, sending money annually, not just for Emma's well-being, but as a form of penance and silent compliance to George's ongoing coercion. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, the anger mixing with relief and disbelief. I sat with the documents she handed me, each one a testament to decades of secrecy, and realized I had a choice. Succumb to rage or find a path forward that preserved my daughter's safety and our fragile family bonds. The rage at George was a consuming fire, but the love for Emma was an anchor. I chose to meet Martin and Adele, the couple who had raised Emma, and felt a strange mixture of gratitude and sorrow, knowing they had loved her as their own while I had been denied every milestone. We talked for hours, piecing together the story from different perspectives, and I slowly understood Linda's reasoning. Her compliance had been a form of penance, a way to keep Emma safe, yet it had cost me 25 years of grief that could never be reclaimed. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of calm, recognizing that forgiveness did not erase the pain, but it allowed me to act with clarity, to protect my daughter while acknowledging the humanity of those who had made impossible choices. The money transfers, the phone calls, the endless paperwork, all of it became evidence, but also a map of intentions and mistakes. I realized that justice and love were not always aligned, that protecting Emma sometimes meant letting go of anger and embracing understanding. By the end of the day, I had accepted that our family was irreparably changed, yet there was hope in rebuilding relationships based on truth and trust rather than fear and secrecy. The first few weeks after Emma returned were awkward and surreal, each of us learning how to exist in the same space after 25 years apart. Meals became our first ritual, sitting at the old oak table that once held birthdays and holiday dinners, and now held conversations that were tentative but full of possibility. I watched her reach for the silverware, and the way her fingers matched mine in shape and size made my chest tighten with disbelief and hope all at once. We spent hours looking through the photo albums she had brought, images of birthdays, school plays, and family vacations that I had never known existed. She pointed out the little things: her first lost tooth, a crooked smile in a fifth-grade class photo, the way she tilted her head when she was nervous, and I found myself laughing and crying at the same time. The years that had been stolen from me were etched into those pages, yet they became the bridge that brought us closer together, a tangible reminder that she was real, alive, and ours. Evenings were spent cooking together, simple dinners of pasta or roast chicken, with Emma humming songs that reminded me of Linda and my younger days. The small habits we shared became the foundation for something bigger: trust, familiarity, and the quiet reassurance that our bond could grow despite the lost time. Watching her pour sauce over her plate, carefully not to spill, I felt a flicker of pride and tenderness I hadn't known I could feel after so many years of grief. I began teaching her small things about our family history, telling her stories about my time in the Navy, about the little victories and mistakes that had shaped me into the man I am today. She listened intently, eyes wide, occasionally laughing at my dry sense of humor, and I realized that these stories, simple as they seemed, were forming the foundation of trust and shared memory between us. Each conversation, each story, each smile brought her closer, but it also allowed me to release a portion of the grief I had carried silently for decades. Meeting Martin and Adele Wayland was another step toward healing. I was nervous at first, unsure how to acknowledge the people who had raised Emma without diminishing my own role as her father. Yet when I saw the love and care in their eyes, the patience they had shown, and the life they had built for her, my resentment softened. I thanked them for keeping her safe and for giving her the kind of childhood that I had feared she would never have. They smiled through tears, and in that quiet moment, I understood that forgiveness was not about excusing the past but about embracing the future. Linda and I began to rebuild a cautious relationship as well, not the marriage we had lost but a partnership centered on Emma's well-being. She admitted her mistakes, her fear, and the guilt she carried all these years, and I listened, learning that understanding and empathy could exist even after betrayal. Our conversations were tentative, but each one became a step toward releasing the anger and embracing the complicated reality that had shaped our lives. Together, we created new routines, small rituals that replaced the lost years. Sunday dinners became sacred again, this time with laughter and conversation, with Emma sharing stories from her life and me sharing memories she had never known. I watched her grow comfortable in our home, placing her belongings, decorating her room with photos and mementos, and I felt a profound sense of relief that the girl who had been a ghost in my life was now fully present. Even simple moments held significance: the first time she hugged me in the kitchen, the way she rolled her eyes at my predictable dad jokes, or the quiet nights spent reading stories before bed. These were the ordinary experiences that created extraordinary bonds, allowing trust, love, and security to grow where grief and loss had once reigned. I realized that the act of being present, of showing up consistently, was more powerful than any words or promises. Over time, I noticed small reflections of our family traits in Emma: the stubborn chin like mine, the patience and kindness of Linda, and subtle gestures that reminded me of my own mother. These echoes of the past became threads weaving a new tapestry of family, one that acknowledged the pain and celebrated the present. I had learned that family was not simply what we lost or what was taken from us. It was what we built together, piece by piece, with intention and care. By the time the first month had passed, the house felt alive again, filled with laughter, conversation, and the quiet moments that signaled healing. Emma and I had established a rhythm, a shared life that honored the past while embracing the possibilities of the present. Sitting in the living room, looking at her asleep on the couch with a book open beside her, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for decades. We were building a future together, a family reshaped by love, patience, and forgiveness. And I knew that while we could never reclaim the lost years, we could create a life that mattered in the here and now. The day we planted the cherry tree in the backyard felt like a rebirth, a quiet symbol that life could grow again from the ashes of the past. Emma helped dig the hole, her hands dirty, her laughter bright against the gray morning sky, and I realized that every year we had mourned together could now be honored by nurturing something living and beautiful. The tree would grow tall and wide, but more importantly, it would mark the start of a family healed enough to move forward while never forgetting what we had lost. I watched her carefully place the roots into the soil, patting the earth gently around them as if coaxing life itself to forgive us for the years we had lost. There was a stillness in the moment that spoke louder than words, a peaceful recognition that while the past could not be reclaimed, the present offered a chance to create something meaningful. I saw hope reflected in Emma's eyes, a mix of resilience and trust, and I understood that love is not measured by years together but by the effort and presence we bring to every shared moment. We spent that afternoon sharing memories and dreams, blending old stories with new ones, and discovering that the connection between us was more than biology. It was intention and care, patience and understanding. The sunlight shifted through the branches, casting moving shadows over the grass, and in that quiet, I felt a sense of closure I had thought impossible. Forgiveness became tangible, not as an abstract concept, but as daily acts of trust, presence, and acknowledgement of each other's humanity. Meeting Emma's adoptive parents again had opened my heart to empathy, showing me that love can take many forms and that protecting a child sometimes requires courage that defies convention. I realized that holding on to anger or resentment would only have continued the cycle of pain, whereas embracing understanding allowed room for growth, connection, and healing. Each conversation with Martin and Adele reminded me that compassion does not erase the past but enriches the future by teaching the value of integrity and kindness. Our daily life began to settle into a rhythm of ordinary yet profound experiences. Cooking meals together, taking evening walks, and simply sitting in the living room sharing thoughts and feelings. The small gestures, her resting a hand on my shoulder, laughing at my clumsy attempts at humor, or recounting a story from her childhood became anchors, grounding us in the reality of what we could now share. These moments reminded me that healing is incremental, built on consistency, trust, and the quiet decision to show up for one another without expectation. I reflected on the lessons learned, the importance of patience, the strength in setting boundaries, and the power of choosing peace over revenge. By allowing myself to forgive, I reclaimed my voice, my presence, and the ability to be a father fully aware of the fragility and beauty of life. I had spent decades carrying grief as if it were a shield, and only when I laid it down could I truly see the potential for joy, love, and connection in the years ahead. Planting the tree became a ritual, a reminder that new beginnings require care and attention, and that the scars of the past can coexist with growth and life. Emma and I worked together to water it, to check the soil, and to ensure it thrived, and in that shared effort, I felt a profound sense of agency and hope. The cherry tree was more than a plant. It was a promise, a living testament to resilience, patience, and the capacity to rebuild what had been lost. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over our home, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a life recalibrated. I looked at Emma and saw not the child I had mourned, but the young woman she had become, strong, kind, and full of promise. It was a reminder that while we cannot control every tragedy, we can choose how to respond, how to nurture love, and how to create a life that matters despite the hardships endured. I hope anyone watching this story takes a moment to consider the value of forgiveness, the courage it takes to protect your own peace, and the beauty in building connections that honor both past and present. Life offers second chances in many forms, and sometimes they arrive quietly, through everyday acts of care, patience, and presence. If you were to meet someone you thought lost forever, what would you do? Would you embrace the chance to rebuild, to forgive, and to love fully? In the stillness of that evening, as the cherry tree swayed gently in the wind and Emma's laughter echoed through the yard, I felt a sense of completion that had been missing for decades. The past had shaped us, the present allowed us to heal, and the future held the promise of something beautiful. We had lost years, but we had gained a life renewed, and that was more than enough to carry forward with gratitude, love, and hope.